Beneath the sun-scorched marble of the Mediterranean lies a secret map of pure mathematics, a grid of invisible cities aligned not by chance, but by a celestial code. Look past the crumbling pillars of the Acropolis. Forget for a moment the noise of the modern world and the salt-heavy air of the Aegean. You see, if we peel back the dust of 25 centuries, a haunting pattern begins to emerge from the limestone and scrubland. We have long been told these temples were built to honor the gods, but the stones suggest a far more complex, perhaps even staggering ambition. When we view these ancient sites from the heavens, the chaos of history dissolves into the absolute clarity of geometry. The distance between the Parthenon in Athens, the Temple of Poseidon at Sunion, and the Temple of Aphaia on Aegina forms a near-perfect isosceles triangle. This is not an isolated coincidence, is it? As we cast our gaze further across the Greek world, we find these sacred structures are linked by a precise mathematical network, a web of equilateral triangles and golden ratios that spans hundreds of miles of rugged terrain and open sea. It is as if the landscape itself was treated as a giant canvas for a cosmic blueprint. These are not merely buildings, they are nodes in a massive ancient computer, calculated with a precision that defies the primitive tools we once believed the Greeks possessed. They were obsessed with harmony, with musica universalis, the music of the spheres. But to achieve this harmony across a continent, that required a mastery of surveying and astronomy that borders on the impossible. Who drew these lines across the earth? Was this a secret cartography intended only for the eyes of the gods? Or were the Greeks tapping into a fundamental frequency of the planet? To understand the invisible cities, we must first understand the minds of the men who saw the world not as a collection of islands and mountains, but as a singular, living equation. They were building a bridge between the soil and the stars, and the map they left behind is only now beginning to reveal its secrets. For centuries, we have been fed a comfortable myth. When we walk through the sun-drenched ruins of the Mediterranean, the story we are told is one of organic growth, of ancient villages slowly sprawling into cities, shaped by the jagged limestone cliffs and the winding blue veins of the sea. We are told the Greeks were a people of pure aesthetics, building their temples where the view was best and their markets where the ground was flat. But as we strip away the dust of millennia and look at the blueprints left behind in the stone, a massive contradiction emerges. The official narrative of simple urban planning, it begins to crumble. To see the truth, we must travel to the coast of what is now modern-day Turkey, to the ancient city of Miletus. Here, the landscape is a chaotic rebellion of earth, craggy, uneven, and unforgiving. By all logic of the ancient world, a city built here should be a labyrinth of winding alleys and staggered heights, following the path of least resistance. Yet Miletus is a geometric miracle. It is laid out on a perfect, uncompromising grid. This was the masterwork of Hippodamus, a man often called the father of urban planning. But to call him an architect, that's like calling a master of the arcane a mere builder. Hippodamus didn't just design streets, he imposed a mathematical order onto the wild chaos of the world. Imagine the sheer engineering madness required to maintain surgical precision across miles of mountainous terrain. They weren't just laying bricks, They were carving a vision of the heavens into the very crust of the earth.
Every street corner in Miletus met at a perfect 90-degree angle. Every block was a calculated fraction of a larger whole. While the rest of the world was building goat paths, the Greeks were practicing a form of high-stakes geometry that defied the natural contours of the land. Why? If it wasn't for ease of construction, because in truth, building a grid on a mountain is an agonizingly difficult task, then what was the motivation? This is the Miletus puzzle. It suggests that the city was not designed for the convenience of man, but to mirror something far more profound. The Greeks believed that the universe was composed of numbers and ratios, a divine harmony that held the stars in their place. By building their cities in these rigid, perfect patterns, they weren't just creating a place to live, they were building a tuning fork. They were attempting to vibrate in resonance with the cosmos itself. But as modern investigators look closer at these grid lines, they are finding something even more unsettling than simple urban planning. When you extend these lines across the horizon, they don't just lead to the next city or the nearest port. They point towards something far more ancient and far more intentional. Because as perfect as the grid of Miletus was, it was only a single piece of a much larger invisible puzzle that spanned the entire ancient world. And that is when we realize Miletus wasn't just a city, it was a landmark for a map that we are only now beginning to comprehend. To truly understand the design of these cities, one must first look at the man who dared to impose such absolute order upon the Aegean landscape, Hippodamus of Miletus. History remembers him as the father of urban planning, But that title, it feels far too small for a man who viewed a city not as a collection of mere stones, but as a mirror for the human soul. To Hippodamus, the chaos of nature was an affront to the divine. He believed that if you could align the streets with the movement of the stars, you could create a resonance between the mortal and the eternal. He wasn't simply a surveyor with a compass, he was a philosopher of the physical world. Walk through the ruins of Miletus today, and you can still feel the weight of his conviction. Every intersection was a calculated choice, every block a geometric manifestation of justice and civic virtue. He pioneered the grid system, the Hippodamian plan, but understand this, it wasn't about efficiency alone, it was about creating a sacred vessel. The Greeks of this era believed that by enforcing this rigid mathematical harmony upon the earth, they were constructing an altar on a monumental scale, a terrestrial beacon designed to invite the gods to walk among them, satisfied by the order they found below. Atmospheric, slightly mysterious, the air in these places is heavy with the legacy of that obsession. It is a quiet, orderly haunting where the remnants of colonnades and agoras whisper of a deeper purpose. Hippodamus claimed his cities were meant to foster an enlightened citizenry, but his writings, they suggest something far more ambitious. He spoke of sacred geometry, a hidden language of shapes and ratios that governed the cosmos, and he sought to lock that language into the very foundations of his architecture.
It was a masterwork of architectural alchemy. By layering his designs over the rugged coastline, he wasn't just building a city, he was performing a ritual. Yet, as we study the maps of these ancient sites, a haunting realization emerges. Hippodamus left behind more than just a grid. He left a trail of breadcrumbs in the stone, leading to a singular, devastating question. If the city was built to mirror the heavens, what exactly was he trying to summon? And why did he leave such specific gaps in his master plan? Because the deeper we look, the more it becomes clear, his true objective was not found within the city gates at all. He had a secondary agenda, a blueprint that extended far beyond the visible walls. And it seems, right? He was hiding something in simple sight.
To understand the true scale of this ancient blueprint, we must look beyond the individual street and toward the horizon itself. You see, the Greeks did not view their cities as isolated fortresses of stone. They saw them as vital organs in a singular living body. And at the center of that body sat the omphalos, the navel of the world. This wasn't merely a poetic title given to the sanctuary of Delphi. To the ancients, it was the 0 point of a cosmic coordinate system. Legend says Zeus released 2 eagles from the opposite ends of the universe, and it was here, amidst the jagged cliffs of Mount Parnassus, where they finally met. But the archaeology suggests something far more calculated than a simple myth. Delphi functioned as the master hub for an invisible network of geometry that spanned the entire Mediterranean. When you map the distance between these sacred sites, the results, they defy coincidence. Draw a line from the Temple of Apollo at Delphi to the Parthenon in Athens. Extend another to the Sanctuary of Olympia. What emerges is a perfect isosceles triangle, carved across hundreds of miles of rugged, mountainous terrain. These were the sacred triangles, a mathematical web that connected the most powerful seats of religion, politics, and sport. But why go to such lengths? For the Greek master builders, architecture was not just about shelter, it was about resonance. I mean, they believed that by placing temples and theaters at specific geometric intervals, they could harmonize human vibrations with the frequency of the universe itself. It was the music of the spheres made manifest in marble. This was a landscape tuned like a lyre, where each city acted as a note in a grand celestial symphony. Yet, as we peel back the layers of this mathematical web, we are forced to confront a technical nightmare. To achieve this level of precision across such vast distances, the architects would have needed more than just string and stakes. They would have needed to account for the curvature of the Earth to a degree of accuracy that shouldn't have been possible for another 2,000 years. The deeper we look into these alignments, the more we realize that the Greeks weren't just looking at the stars to find their gods. They were using the stars to measure the very ground beneath their feet with the precision of a modern satellite. But how could a civilization of bronze and parchment grasp the true dimensions of the globe so perfectly? To find that answer, we have to look at the one detail that every historian, until now, has chosen to ignore.
The ignored detail wasn't found in a dusty scroll or a yellowed map, but right here, in the very heart of Athens. High atop the Acropolis stands the Parthenon, a structure we've all seen 1,000 times, you know? Yet we rarely truly behold it. When Pericles commissioned this marble titan, he wasn't merely building a temple for Athena, he was engineering a living organism. To the naked eye, the Parthenon is a masterpiece of straight lines and perfect right angles. But here is the kicker. This is the first great deception of the Greek masters. In reality, there isn't a single straight line in the entire building. The architects, Ictinus and Callicrates, understood a fundamental flaw in human biology. Our eyes play tricks on us. Perfectly horizontal lines appear to sag. Perfectly vertical columns seem to lean outward. To combat this, they infused the stone with entasis, a subtle swelling in the middle of each column. They tilted the pillars inward and curved the floor upward. They utilized the golden ratio, that divine proportion of 1 to 1.618, to dictate every height, width, and gap. The result is a temple that doesn't just sit on the rock, it breathes. It appears light, almost floating, as if the heavy pentelic marble has been transformed into something divine.
Yet the geometry didn't stop at the temple's edge. This was merely one gear in a much larger machine. Researchers have recently identified what can only be described as a stellar trigger. You see, the Parthenon, along with its sister temples across the Aegean, wasn't placed randomly. These invisible cities were positioned with such surgical precision that they served as the markers of a giant astronomical clock. On specific sacred nights, a priest standing at the altar would see a specific constellation rise directly through the central axis of the temple. The entire landscape of Greece was rigged to the movement of the heavens, turning the earth into a mirror of the stars. But why go to such lengths, right? Why hide this cosmic calendar in plain sight, etched into the very stones of their cities? The answer lies in a discovery that shatters everything we thought we knew about ancient navigation. Because while the Greeks were looking up at the stars, they were using that light to unlock a door that shouldn't have been opened for another 1,000 years. However, there was one location where this geometry became so intense it began to defy the very laws of the physical world. The brilliance of the Greek mind did not fade overnight. It was dismantled, stone by stone, through the slow, grinding machinery of history. As the Roman Republic expanded into an empire, the mathematical elegance of the Greek grid met with a force that prioritized the practical over the profound. To the Romans, you see, a road was a means of conquest, not a tether to the stars. The cosmic alignments that once dictated the placement of every marketplace and temple began to blur under the weight of a new utilitarian hegemony. This was the beginning of the Great Silence. The Romans were masters of imitation, right? But they were often blind to the deeper why behind the Greek how. They adopted the grid system, the Hippodamian plan, because it was efficient for moving legions and managing taxes. But the subtle geometric keys, the specific angles that harmonized a city with the rising of the solstice or the path of the moon, those were dismissed as mere remnants of a superstitious past. The architects of the New World were engineers, not initiates.
As the centuries rolled on and the Byzantine era rose from the ruins of the West, a second layer of erasure began. The temples that served as the anchors for these geometric webs were either pulled down or converted into churches. Crosses were carved into pediments that once celebrated the golden ratio. The sacred geometry was treated as pagan heresy, a secret language that the new faith sought to overwrite. The stones remained, standing defiant against the Mediterranean wind, but the key to reading them had vanished. We must ask ourselves, what happened to the final scrolls of Hippodamus? The man known as the father of urban planning didn't just leave behind blueprints, he left behind a philosophy of the perfect city, a map of how human society could be reflected in the divine order of the universe. History tells us his works were lost in the great fires that claimed the libraries of the ancient world. But, and I mean this, some scholars whisper of a different fate. They suggest that as the Great Silence descended, the keepers of the code realized the world was no longer ready for the power these cities held. By the time the Middle Ages took hold, the invisible cities were truly invisible. People walked through streets aligned to the heavens, completely unaware that the very pavement beneath their feet was a part of a massive terrestrial computer. The mathematical silence was so absolute that the grids were eventually forgotten entirely, dismissed as coincidental or the product of simple convenience. The Greeks had built a bridge between the earth and the infinite, and the rest of the world simply forgot how to cross it. But even in the deepest silence, a secret cannot stay buried forever, because while the scrolls were burned and the priests were silenced, there was one single detail everyone missed, a single persistent anomaly that the Roman engineers couldn't erase, no matter how much marble they piled on top of it. The ghost of the Greek dream does not vanish with the crumbling of marble columns. It migrated. When you walk through the structured, grid-based boulevards of New York, the orderly arterial roads of London, or the purposeful planning of Paris, you are not merely moving through modern asphalt. You are treading upon the mathematical legacy of the ancients. The Greeks believed that the layout of a city was a mirror held up to the heavens, a reflection of the celestial order they witnessed in the movement of the stars and the precision of the golden ratio. You know, they didn't just build for shelter or commerce. They built to align the human experience with the divine geometry of the universe. We have largely forgotten this invisible architecture, dismissing it as a relic of a primitive time, yet our cities still pulse with that exact same rhythm. Every time a city planner insists on a perfect square, or an architect aligns a glass tower to catch the exact arc of the solstice sun, the ghost of Hippodamus of Miletus is there guiding the compass. We are living inside their blueprint. The tragedy is not that we stopped building, it is that we stopped listening to the language of the stones. We forgot that humanity once dared to believe that survival was not enough, that we were meant to build for the eternity of the stars. Look closely at the world around you, the intersections, the plazas, the hidden symmetries in your own neighborhood. They are echoes of a time when the earth was a reflection of the infinite. The stones remember the calculations, the intentions, and the dreams of those who first dared to chart the heavens upon the soil.
If you believe that the past still has secrets to tell, and that the blueprints of our ancestors still hold the key to understanding our place in the cosmos, subscribe and join us as we continue to uncover the lost wonders of our world. What do you see when you look at the streets of your own city? Do you see mere pavement, or do you see the shadow of an ancient star map? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.